Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on Big Blue View Radio. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening across the Big Blue View Radio network, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, this is our Friday morning show, and that means it's a game day for the New York Giants. They have a preseason game Friday night against the Detroit Lions. And here to help me break down what we saw in joint practices this week and what we might see tonight in the preseason game is Jeremy Reisman of SB Nation's Lions website, Pride of Detroit. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ed. I'm happy to be celebrating some football today.
Yeah, football. Amazing. We made it. We made it. We made it to almost real football.
I'll take it at this point.
Yes, there will be players running around in pads, although they probably won't be most of the big time players, and the result doesn't matter. So the final score doesn't matter. Let's put it that way.
Let's just hope for a healthy Friday night for both teams.
Yes, there you go. That would be a good thing. Let me start with this. You had the good fortune of seeing the two Giants-Lions joint practices this week, which were in Allen Park at Detroit's practice facility. Mm-hmm. And I know you were focused on the Lions. I know you were focused on your team and providing content for Pride of Detroit. But can you step back for a second and just offer me, any sort of perspective on what you saw from the Giants over those 2 days?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the easy way to do that is like, okay, what did the Lions struggle at? The Giants were good at that, right? And I think what the Lions struggled with really both days was running the football and stopping the run. I think I like the Giants offense. It's nuanced in some of the things they do. There's a lot of misdirection. Having that kind of mobile quarterback, really with all three teams of your offense, really had the Lions kind of on edge with all the misdirection and stuff. So they were running up the middle. They were running, to the outside. They were running reverses. They were, keeping things fresh and different. And I think the Lions needed something like that because they have a guy like Justin Fields in their division. But it was something that they saw a lot of success in both day one and day two. Then on the other side, the Lions are a team that has high expectations to run the ball, and we haven't really seen it much in training camp, but, there's not live tackling. You never really know when you're going up against your own team. Is your offense doing really good, or is your defense doing really good, or is it both, or is it neither? But yeah, I thought the Giants pretty much stymied most of the Lions' rushing attack all practice on day one and day two, which is a disappointing thing on the Lions level because they have such a highly thought of offensive line. Granted that they were missing their starting center, they were missing their starting left guard as well for practices. So the Giants probably had a personnel advantage there, but schematically, they took it to the Lions, I would say, in the trenches when it came to specifically to run defense and run offense.
That's good news from a Giants perspective, because run defense was an issue for the Giants last year. They spent a good bit of money in the offseason trying to upgrade that run defense. Bobby Okereke at the middle linebacker spot. Probably didn't see. I know Raheem Nunez-Roches didn't practice during the two joint practices, but Nunez-Roches and A'Shawn Robinson, backup defensive tackles, brought in to help the run defense. So that's good news from that perspective. And also from the offensive side, the one thing I've been saying about the Giants offense with Darren Waller, with a couple of the new wide receivers that they have, is that they almost seem to have a positionless receiving group where they're just where you never know exactly where guys are going to line up. You never know from snap to snap where you're going to find Waller, where you're going to find Campbell, where you're going to find a lot of these guys. Did you notice that as an issue for the Lions defense at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Darren Waller was maybe the best offensive player for the Giants all week, I should say. Definitely posed a lot of trouble for the Lions. And in fact, like, the more I think about it, the more I think they're kind of built like Detroit in a lot of ways in terms of their skill position players. You look at maybe just the wideouts of both teams and you're not blown away. Like the Lions have Amon-Ra St. Brown. You guys have Darius Slayton. Paris Campbell is a guy who's still kind of up and coming, I would say. But it's the collective group, right? It's Saquon Barkley, it's Darren Waller, it's everyone collectively. And so if you just focus on the wide receivers, you might not think the Giants or the Lions have that stellar of a group. But when you throw in the tight end, the Lions have Sam Laporta and now they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. It's all of them working kind of together to attack all levels of the field. And I think that's something that the Giants were starting to do, especially on day two. I think I'm sure Giants fans kind of heard the momentum of practices. Day one seemed to be kind of favored in the Lions direction. Day two was favored in the Giants direction. And I would say that the passing game really kind of took off on day two for the Giants. And I think, like you said, it's kind of that array of pass catchers, not necessarily just your wide receivers that gave the Lions some trouble.
Yeah, and in the end, it's practice. It's nice that it's against another opponent. Brian Daboll said that, no matter the results, no matter who, quote unquote, wins or loses the practice, it's invaluable work against another team. I don't know if the Lions and Dan Campbell feel the same way.
No question. In fact, Dan was so excited about these practices. Particularly, is it Wink Martindale, right? The
yes.
Defensive court. Like he was so excited to face a defense that throws so many different looks than what the Lions' own defense can throw it at the Lions' offense. So just kind of having a different defense, not necessarily one that's better or worse or has certain players here, certain players there. It's just different schematics to practice against. And again, I think that helped the Lions offense or the Lions defense as well, right? Because you have this mobile quarterback, this misdirection offense that has skill position players in the backfield at tight end. Having all of that just diversifies what you're prepared for now going into the season. And so that was something Dan Campbell specifically pointed to before the Giants even came in the building. Like he was chomping at the bit to just get different players, different schemes, different looks for his team, because that's what you need. Every week is going to be a new challenge in the NFL. No two teams are alike. So just getting someone diversified in there for really three practices, right? Like,
right.
You got Tuesday, you got Wednesday, now you got Friday, the game. So it's invaluable, I would say, like you said, for the Lions as well.
And I think we got through the 2 days with no fisticuffs.
Yeah. There was some helmet shoving and things like that. Maybe a face mask grab or two, but no punches thrown from what I saw. And it got competitive and people got in each other's faces. And what I really liked about these joint practices compared to ones that I've seen in the past is that at the very end of each practice, it was one team versus one team. And the offense and defense were watching. A lot of times you'll see the entire practice, the offense is on one field, the defense is on the other field. They never watch each other because they're staying busy. But you could really kind of feel the competitive juices come into that last segment where the defense is watching the offense is watching the defense, and everyone is just kind of like rallying each other up. It felt kind of game-like in a way. But yeah, I think both these coaches are smart enough to know that fighting, it really isn't. It's entertaining, and we post it on social media, and people get riled up about it. But there's really no positive thing to it. You're wasting time. If you punch someone in the face mask, you might break a finger, right? Like there's no gain in that. And so I think the Lions and Giants both kind of expertly walk that line of keeping it competitive, keeping it aggressive, keeping it, fun and energetic without crossing that line of hurting someone.
Yeah, I remember there was a Giants practice, not a joint practice, but there was a Giants practice a couple of years ago where a fight broke out, and thank goodness he missed. But these guys had their helmets off, and Dexter Lawrence took his helmet and swung it at one of the Giants' offensive linemen, and nothing good was ever going to come out of that if it connected.
Right. Yeah. No one wants that.
No. So last real question about the joint practices. Giants fans are always concerned about the offensive line, and it was really unfortunate from a Giants perspective that Evan Neal, second-year right tackle, was unable to practice due to the concussion he suffered the other day. But just impressions of how the Giants' offensive line held up over the couple of days.
I would say okay. The starters were okay. Once you got into the depth, I think the Lions' defensive line, which is a lot deeper than it has been in years past, kind of dominated the play, particularly in pass rush. I would say on the first team, though, really the only person that gave the Giants consistent offensive line problems was Aiden Hutchinson, who was mostly going up against their backup right tackle. So I think that would probably be expected, considering he's usually coming off that side, although he does switch up every now and then. But Aiden Hutchinson had a really good 2 days of practice. I think he had 2 sacks on the first day, and there were a couple videos that the Lions posted of him winning a couple one-on-ones on Wednesday as well. So in general, I think probably more good than bad from the Giants offensive line. But when you have a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, it's hard not to focus on that and maybe not see some of the other things going on. And like I said, I think they were running the ball well, even with the Lions ones out there too. So in terms of run blocking, I think that team that offensive line is doing a pretty darn good job. Pass protection might be an issue though.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about the preseason game.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see anything at all this week from Brian Daboll in terms of how he was going to approach Friday night, in terms of would starters play a little bid, would he keep all of the frontline guys out? And the reality of it is, I know Daboll well enough to know that I think even the New York media that was at joint practices were like, he's not going to answer the question anyway. He's just going to tell us he hasn't thought about it, and I'll talk to the coaches on Thursday about it.
Yeah.
But I don't expect to see Giants starters play much, if at all. I would think, especially coming off a joint practice week, that guys like Daniel Jones and Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, the frontline guys, they're just going to say they got their work in this week. Yep. They got their competitive stuff in, and that they won't play. How do you expect Dan Campbell and the Lions to handle, who plays and who doesn't?
I think you nailed it. It's going to be very similar on the Lions side. Dan was asked on Wednesday, and he basically said, I have an idea, but I'm not completely sure yet, so I don't want to say anything. Which to me, and he said, the guys that you think aren't going to play are probably not going to play, essentially. And so, yeah, I would say most of your star players, I wouldn't say maybe everyone of the line starters is going to be off the field, but a large amount of them, the important guys, I would probably the starting offensive line, your quarterback. I would expect maybe all of the rookies to get some playing time. So Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, the like of that. They'll get some good action. But I would say at least half of the starters to probably sit, because this is a big year for the Lions. And like you said, joint practices, this is kind of the point of joint practices, is you can control what your starters do. It can be a little bit safer than maybe a preseason game. And you get real live action against an opponent team while all kind of holding the joystick, so to speak, of what situations you can put everyone in. So, yeah, I think that's the great thing about joint practices for the team. Maybe not a great thing for fans, as I think some of the little what little excitement you get out of a preseason game is probably a little bit lowered by the proliferation of these joint practices that take away all those first team reps. But it's safer for the team. It's probably better for their analysis of their first teamers, and and if you're one of those fans that really gets into, camp battles and things like that, then the preseason is still going to be kind of entertaining for you.
Absolutely. Do you still find it a little bit weird with the 3 preseason games? I think that we used to know exactly what the rhythm of preseason would be in terms of who would play, and you didn't have to ask. You knew that the 3rd preseason game was the dress rehearsal, and guys wouldn't play in the 4th one and all of that. I think that teams are still kind of figuring out how to do all of that with 3 preseason games, and with 2 weeks between the last preseason game and the first regular season game. You kind of get the same idea that teams are still sort of figuring out what the best way to do this is now.
Oh yeah, I totally get that sense. I don't think any team has a consensus dress rehearsal game, if that even exists anymore. Like maybe that's gone by the wayside of these joint practices. Everyone's kind of doing the joint practices now, so maybe they're like, we don't need the dress rehearsal. We're getting 2 straight weeks. Lions have 2 joint practices. I'm not sure how much everyone else has, but maybe those 2 weeks of joint practices in Detroit is good enough for their starters that they don't need any of those guys to have playing time. It's kind of it's I don't know how long it's been. Was it year 3 or year 4 of only 3 preseason games?
I think it's 3.
Year 3, yeah. So I don't know, and now this year, like the cut downs have changed too. You used to have to cut down to 80 and then 75 or whatever it was, and now you're just going from 90 straight to 53. So maybe you want all of your reserves to play in that last third preseason game, whereas maybe your starters would get a little bit of playing time in that game. But I don't know if if they're continually changing the rules about the amount of preseason games, about the cut downs, it's hard to kind of find that rhythm, find that what works best for you. So I don't know if we're going to kind of come to a conclusion here of what's best for everybody, or if we're going to kind of keep trying to figure it out, or maybe just every team is going to have their own idea of how the preseason is going to work.
Yeah, I think that's how it's going to be. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. I know the Giants were going to have 2 sets of joint practices this year, but the second set of joint practices would have been against the New York Jets, and the Giants play them in the preseason and in the regular season. So that one, they decided to let that one go for a year. So this set of joint practices was it for the Giants. So, but it was good work, and I think it sounded like both teams got something out of it.
No question. Yeah, I think you always get, like you said, even if you're getting beat up, if you're getting your butts kicked, it's a learning lesson. It's the butt kicking maybe you need to like bounce back, which is kind of how I view how the first day and the second day played out. Like the Lions kind of took it to the Giants, and like that's a good learning lesson from the Giants. Like you can't go into someone else's house and come with that sort of intensity. You got to pick it up, and so they did in day 2. And I think now the Lions probably learned the lesson, like you can't sit on your laurels after beating a team up for, let's say, the first half of a football game. Like they're going to come back and counterpunch you. And so, learning lesson for both teams, not to mention good work and varied looks from the opponents too. So yeah, always beneficial, especially when I believe both teams avoided any sort of serious injury too during these joint practices. So win-win for both teams, no question.
There you go. So let's talk a little bit about the 2023 Lions and expectations for this team. Obviously, it's been a minute for the Lions.
Yeah,
it's been a minute, but this is an organization. Dan Campbell's a guy, people loved him when he was a player for the Giants, and I always thought that maybe he was a dark horse candidate over the last few years when the Giants had coaching openings. But he seems to have this thing pointed in the right direction. Just what's the expectation level for the Lions this year? I mean, what would quote unquote satisfy the fan base?
I think at the minimum, winning the division, which in and of itself sounds like a lofty goal for a team that hasn't won the division since 1993. But given everything that's shaken the way it has in the NFC North, like they are the odds-on favorite. They are the team that is expected to win the division this year, and they finished 8-2 last year, an incredible stretch down the season. They take out a Packers team that had everything to play for when they had nothing to play for in the division. I mean, and you guys saw, the Lions kind of took it to the Giants in New York last year, a good Giants team that was kind of on a roll at the time. So I think they're taking that confidence from last year and thinking like, we can play with the big boys. We beat a team that won a playoff game. We beat a Minnesota team pretty handily that also won the division and won 13, 14 games or whatever it was last year. And so, no Aaron Rodgers. The Vikings lose a ton of players. The Bears are still on the up and up, maybe a year or two behind where the Lions are. This is a division for the taking this year. And, you can tell the excitement is building here in Detroit. They sold out season tickets for the first time in Ford Field history, which dates back to 2002. And so I think those people are getting those season tickets because they are expecting the first Detroit Lions home playoff game since 1993. Like that's the expectation and if you have a home playoff game, I guess the expectation is to kind of win that too. So it's a very high bar for this franchise that, again, to throw out another ridiculous stat, they have won one playoff game in the history of the Super Bowl. Going all the way back to Super Bowl I, they've won a single playoff game. And the expectation now is to win a playoff, is to double that number. So, it's a weird, exciting time to be a Lions fan. You're always optimistic if you're a Lions fan at this point in the season, but there's so many signs that this year is different. And so expectations are really high. I mean, once you're finally in a division that no longer has a Hall of Fame quarterback in it in Green Bay, I think there's at least a little bit of reason to be optimistic.
There you go. And I have to remind Giants fans, you said that the Lions have won one playoff game in the entire Super Bowl era.
That's correct.
And as much as Giants fans complain sometimes, and as bad as things were from 2011 through before last year came along and the Giants made the playoffs and won a playoff game, I think Giants fans, I think there are a whole lot of fan bases that would trade places with Giants fans with the accomplishments of a franchise that has 4 Super Bowl trophies in the building and got to a 5th one. So it could be a lot. Yes, it could be a lot worse, Giants fans. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of fan bases that have suffered a whole lot more than you have.
Yeah, no question.
So final thing for you, in terms of talking about the Lions did something in the draft that sort of flew in the face of common perceptions of modern thinking about the way that you conduct a draft and utilize positional value and all of that. They drafted a running back at 12 in Jahmyr Gibbs and an inside linebacker at 18, both of whom are good players. Yeah. But I thought, for example, that the Giants might have a shot at Jack Campbell at 57. But how is that working out? And I'm just curious how the Lions, considering the way everybody thinks about positional value, how they explained it.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I was team never draft a running back in the first round. And so when Bijan Robinson went off the board at 8 or 9 or whatever it was, I breathed a sigh of relief. I'm like, okay, cool. They avoided the trap there. Little did I know that Jahmyr Gibbs was coming a couple picks later to Detroit. And so, yeah, their explanation, and you can choose to buy it or not. I understand it. I don't know if I fully buy it, is that Jahmyr Gibbs is not just a running back. They rep him with the wide receivers quite often in training camp. They view him as an offensive weapon. That is probably like on the level of an Alvin Kamara. I really truly think that what the Lions are trying to build offensively is exactly what the Saints did in the early Alvin Kamara days, which is you have Alvin Kamara who's going to catch 80 passes a game and run the ball maybe 100 times, and then you have your Mark Ingram type, which the Lions do in David Montgomery, and he's going to run the ball 200 times. And that works. That is a good offensive system that works, that we've seen work in the past. And if the Lions got Alvin Kamara in Jahmyr Gibbs, then I don't think people are going to be complaining too much, 3 or 4 years down the road. That said, part of the reason why drafting a running back is a bad idea is that after those first 4 or 5 years on that rookie contract, there aren't a lot of examples of running backs being worth a second contract. And so maybe you get all you can possibly get out of Jahmyr Gibbs, and he lives up to all the expectations of a first-round draft pick within that first 4 years, but maybe he's gone after that. And then you have the philosophical question, was a first-round pick worth it for 3, 4, 5 years of excellent running back play and nothing else? Or could you have done something better, gotten a cornerback that's going to be your corner for the next 10, 15 years? We'll have to see how the rest of the draft plays out. That's one that I've at least won myself over a little bit on that one. I'm like, okay, I get what they're trying to do there. If it works out, I'm probably not going to complain. Jack Campbell, though, that one I'm having a little bit tougher time with, because I don't think off-ball linebackers are exactly important positions in the NFL. And I think the elite type are so rare in this league that maybe you can count them on one hand, that are really, truly game-changing off-ball linebackers. To me, that's kind of an old man's way of looking at the NFL. I think speed and perimeter is what wins in the NFL today. And so having that kind of like run stuffing force who may struggle in coverage against some of the speedier guys like Darren Waller, might not be as of much use in the NFL as they once were. And it's the one thing that still occasionally has me questioning Dan Campbell is like, is he a little bit too much of an old head when it comes to strategy and guys that he loves? Is it kind of that old school hard knock mentality of football that might not jive with what the league is today? But at the same time, the league is always cyclical, right? Like if you keep getting faster on the outsides, well, then you'll get beat up the middle, right? And so, that's kind of how they explain it. They think Jack Campbell is a guy who's going to be a leader. They're Mike linebacker, the smart, physical, big and athletic linebacker that can be kind of your captain of your defense for the next 10, 15 years. My rebuttal to that is those kind of players are very rare in today's NFL. So it's got to show me it.
Absolutely. We'll see how it works out for the Lions. I know the Giants have their own experience with drafting a running back really, really early that they're going through right now. And I think that at least when it comes to running back, I'm with you. I think I have always been, don't draft that running back in the first round. I'll say unless it's a real franchise changing kind of running back. Or the way that I look at it, do you feel like you're a really good team where that particular player completes what you need on that side of the ball?
Yeah.
So, but it's a very tricky situation to put yourself in, and we'll see how it works out for the Lions over the next couple of years, and we'll see how tonight's game works out. As you said at the top, hopefully, biggest thing of all, hopefully there are no big injuries, and we go from there. So, Jeremy, thank you very, very much for hopping on, folks. If you want the Lions' perspective on the joint practices, on tonight's preseason game, on all of that, check out Pride of Detroit. So, with that said, Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.